All right, good evening. Special edition of Fourth String Podcast. It's just me tonight, going to be quick, but just a reaction show to the semifinal games. By the way, if I look gross tonight, it's because I just went for a run. It's 70 degrees outside, feels like it's Florida weather. So went for a nice run. The weather is absolutely gorgeous outside. Had a lot of fun. And yeah, the man cave was a mess. Had people over for New Year's and Christmas, and we were playing games up here. And so, yeah, haven't really into getting it all cleaned up just yet. So it's why if you look at me, you look at the man cave, and you're like, whoa, a little bit of a mess. It is. Just deal with it. So let's talk about these semifinal games. And first I want to talk about TCU Michigan, because I think that is far and away the more fun game to analyze. I think there's so many different angles for it. First and foremost, we've like Sonny Dykes is coach of the year. And there is no second place, in my opinion. There's a lot of cool coaches like Mike Elko, what he did with Duke, incredible. But Sonny Dykes is far and away coach of the year. It's funny. I saw Old Takes Exposed retweet somebody that had predicted TCU to finish last in the Big 12. And like, it's okay, it's funny. I thought TCU was going to finish somewhere near the bottom of the Big 12. Nobody thought TCU was anywhere in contention for a top 4 team in their own conference. The fact that they went undefeated in the regular season, got to the playoffs, and just went toe to toe with Michigan is really incredible. It's really incredible. And it is, in my opinion, a total testament to Sonny Dykes and what he has done. Rebuilding that team and really putting all of that together. I think it's insane what he's done. I don't know, and I've tried to look at when have we ever seen a team go from 2 wins to in contention like this. I mean, we all love Brian Kelly. He couldn't do that with LSU. And LSU, I would argue, has much, much better players. A lot of people like Steve Sarkisian. Well, Steve Sarkisian's been at Texas now 3-4 years. He can't even get a Big 12 title out of it, and that's with Oklahoma down. So I look at what TCU or what Sonny Dykes has done at TCU, and I mean, it's unprecedented what he has done. Just absolutely incredible. But if you look at this game, a lot of people want to go to the Michigan replay, where he had the catch. It doesn't get possession until he's into the end zone. So obviously, you look at that and you think, okay, this is a touchdown. And I would agree. Like, I'm watching this play. Ben and I were texting back and forth, and I'm like, dude, this looks like a touchdown. And he's like, yeah, I think the exact same thing. It ends up not being called a touchdown. We can go back and forth on whether it should have been. I think it should have been. But what I would argue is, in reality, like, dude, you're gonna get calls. The other team's gonna get calls. That's part of football. Look at actually what you did in your performance in that game. Michigan turned it over 3 times. They had 2 fumbles, critical fumbles, and they had 2 or I'm sorry, they had a fumble, they had 2 pick sixes, and they had 2 opportunities at the goal line where they didn't convert. And I'm sorry, but like, I mean, I don't know, and I'd love to see the statistic. How has any team ever won after throwing 2 pick sixes in a game? And has any team ever won after having 2 goal line stands where they didn't come away with points, any points? And I don't know that we've ever seen a team do that and also come away victorious. So I mean, when you look at that, like, there's reasons why TCU won that game. And if you really break down the game, I think there's a couple of other things to look at too. Look at the yards per rush. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is such a big statistic in a second. But if you look at both of these games, yards per rush was dominated by the winning team. With TCU, they averaged 6.4 yards per rush. Georgia averaged 5.2 and 6.4 for TCU rather. And so each team in these games averaged almost exactly a yard and a half extra per run than the team that lost. Now, why is that such a big deal? Because that tells you who had the better push on the line of scrimmage. And if you ever watch Jim Harbaugh, you'll notice like first series in a game, he always lines up and he's got that weird thing where he like crunches down right at the line of scrimmage. He's looking to see what kind of a push is his team going to have. He wants to know, do we need to change the game plan if we're not getting a good push off the line of scrimmage? And this is one that was evident very early on. TCU came to play. They were aggressive. They were physical, which I just don't think Michigan expected. I think Michigan expected TCU was going to come out and throw the ball a bunch, not just run it right down their throat, which is exactly what they did. And if you watch this game, if you want to be honest about this game, TCU just flat out outplayed Michigan. It is not what I expected. Both Ben and I had predictions on this podcast. I said TCU was going to score 3 points. It's by far the worst prediction I have had all year, and I have had some clunkers this year. It was bad. But, I mean, watching that game, in all sincerity, it wasn't a fluke. TCU proved me wrong. They came out, played a heck of a game, and tip of the cap to Sonny Dykes. Thought he did a great job. Ohio State and Georgia, watched that game too. This was a game where I felt like Ohio State outplayed Georgia for most of that game, yet Georgia came away victorious. This is what great teams and great coaches do. When they get outplayed, they still find a way to win. CJ Stroud played the best game. I mean, the best game of his career. And it didn't matter. I mean, it mattered. It made it a close game, but it wasn't significant enough to give Ohio State the win. And I don't know exactly what to make of that. And if you look at Georgia, you went 2 for 10 on the third downs and scored 42 points. It's crazy. If you go 2 for 10 on third downs, you should not win that game. They lost time of possession. They had twice as many penalty yards as Ohio State did. They turned it over. Ohio State didn't turn it over. There were so many reasons why Ohio State outplayed Georgia other than that yards per rush. And it's just wild to me that we come away and at the end of it, all of these stats that we know mean things, Georgia still wins the game despite being outplayed by Ohio State. And I think Kirby Smart, we don't give him enough credit for how good of a coach he is, but he's in that Saban territory, especially if he wins back to back. Are you kidding me? Like, you know how many coaches have won back to back in college football? Not many. And if you look at next year, who's going to be the odds on favorite? It's going to be Georgia again. And that's with Stetson Bennett leaving. I mean, and by the way, I don't think Stetson Bennett's going to be that hard to replace. And I like Stetson Bennett, but he ain't going to be that hard to replace. Georgia right now is playing at such an incredible level. And I do think, and I know TCU came out, they played Michigan to a really close game. Listen, TCU played an absolutely perfect game. Michigan made all the mistakes, and TCU got a wildly favorable call, and still Michigan had an opportunity to win it late. Georgia had everything go wrong. The other team's quarterback played perfect, and Georgia still found a way to win. I don't think Georgia is going to play that poorly, especially on defense again. And I don't think we're going to get that good of a game again from TCU. So, like, I know I doubted them against Michigan. It's not about, switching or anything like that. I just think what we saw were you had these semifinal games, two teams, TCU and Ohio State, that came in as the underdogs and knew we're going to have to play perfect to have any chance. And they both did. One just happened to come away victorious and the other didn't. But you don't get perfection on back-to-back weeks. You just don't get that. So my prediction for Monday night, I think Georgia's going to win it. Now, I don't think it's going to be an absolute shellacking. I think TCU will keep it competitive probably until the second half. But I do think it's going to be somewhere around like 35-17, somewhere in that neighborhood. And Georgia's going to win. You're going to be talking about now back-to-back championships for Kirby Smart, which is pretty incredible. All right, let's talk about Jim Harbaugh. So Jim Harbaugh is rumored to be very interested in an NFL offer. There are rumors out today that if the Broncos were to offer him, that he would very seriously consider, which is always interesting. Like if something's going to come up with a rumor, Why wouldn't a rumor just be, hey, if he's offered it, he's going to accept it? Like, it's a rumor. What difference does that make? Like, why do we have to get into the wording of like, yes, he would be interested? Like, to me, that doesn't mean anything. Like, he would be interested. I mean, I think a lot of coaches would be interested if they were offered a job. That doesn't give me any information as to whether or not they would take it. Now, what is interesting is, and I was listening to Cowherd earlier, and he mentioned that Harbaugh would be paid upwards of $12 million a year. That could be the offer from Denver. That would set a totally, completely new precedent in the NFL of what coaches are worth. And that is really, really interesting if he gets that big of an offer. I mean, I don't know. Like, I've never heard of a coach getting paid $20 million a year to be a head coach. And if that happens, you'll see other coaches in the NFL, McVay, Andy Reid, who are going to start saying, wait a minute, $20 million, he's getting that. He's never won a Super Bowl. And here I have. And, I've got this really competitive quarterback. You don't want to see me go. They're going to want to get paid. It's going to be a game changer if that is what ends up happening. Now, what I think Harbaugh is doing, complete honestly, I don't think Harbaugh is going to leave Michigan. Now, I could be wrong. And he not interviewed, but he talked with like the Panthers owner. That's another thing. It's like rumor comes out. Not even a rumor, it was confirmed, I guess. He talked with the Panthers owner, but they're not going to call it an interview. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't mean anything. They talked on the phone. What they talk about? Golf? Talk about football? What they talk about? I don't know. So would he take an NFL offer? I don't think Jim Harbaugh is actually going to leave Michigan anytime soon. I think he likes Michigan. I think the life of being a college football head coach is substantially better than being an NFL head coach. And that's even with all of the, the year-round recruiting and the transfer portal and the NIL stuff we're getting to. I still think, gosh, if you're a college coach, you can make $8-9 million a year. And you're working, 60 hours a week. That's better than these NFL coaches who are literally working from like 4 a.m. until midnight every single night of the season. And then it's a lot of the same even during the off season. You don't get a break from it. And that's why a lot of these guys, by the way, they fade out. And so do you want to go take $20 million, which would be fine. But if you go to the Broncos and Russell Wilson's washed up and it doesn't work out and they fire you and Michigan's hired somebody else who's working out really well, it's like, okay, well, now you're going to have to go peruse through college jobs again. Are you going to find a college job that you enjoy as much as Michigan? Now, I know most coaches would say, well, I'm not going to take a job under the consideration that I might fail. I get that. I'm just saying, like, you could be a successful NFL head coach and still get fired. Harbaugh was at San Francisco and still got fired. So I think this idea that he goes into Denver and it just works and it ends up being this long tenured thing, I don't know that that's the case. And I think Harbaugh knows that too. And I would be surprised if he leaves Michigan. He feels like Michigan, by the way. This feels like where he should be. What I think he's probably doing, though, is after that COVID year, Michigan was down. And Michigan asked him, because they had a real bad year, and they asked him, hey, we want you to take a pay cut. And he didn't make any qualms. He said, okay, I'm going to take a pay cut. And then last year, what happened? They got to the playoffs. And then this year, what happened? They got to the playoffs. And both years, they've beaten Ohio State, right? And so I think Harbaugh's saying, okay, in COVID, where I was dealing with this, massive health issue and having to juggle all of these balls and trying to just navigate through that, where, yes, we had a down year, you asked me to take a pay cut in that year. So now that we're successful and I've got a little bit of leverage, I'm going to use that to make up where I missed. And yes, I'm going to use that and I'm going to force your hand to pay me way more than what you're comfortable paying me because I can, because you don't want to lose me to some NFL team. And so I think he's using a lot of this for leverage. I think what he could also be doing is using this for leverage to keep his assistants. If you look at the landscape of college football right now, especially with all this transfer portal stuff and NIL stuff, keeping your assistants around, keeping your coordinators around is more meaningful than it's ever been. You don't want to lose those guys. And so I think Harbaugh is looking at those guys saying, look, if I'm going to keep these guys around, I'm going to have to pay him more. And he needs more help from his boosters, needs more help from alumni to be able to do that, and from the athletic department. And so I think he could be leveraging these NFL offers basically to just try and get more money to be able to keep his assistants around. There was a Jim Mora did this for a long time at UCLA. Like every year, Jim Mora's name would come out rumored to be in an NFL job, and he would never take it, and he'd always end up right back at UCLA. But his assistants would get a big pay raise. He literally did this like I mean, I think it was 3 or 4 consecutive years that Jim Mora did this when he was at UCLA. And I think this is a lot of the same. Jim Harbaugh's name was rumored to be in NFL offers last year. I think with Minnesota, it magically didn't happen. Do you really think he's going to go to Carolina? And I mean, I'm a Panther fan. You can see in the background. See that? You really think he's going to go to Carolina? Coach Sam Darnold. You really think he's going to go to Denver? And I don't care about the Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Raiders stuff. Like, I think he cares about the competition. But you think he looks at that roster in Denver and says, yeah, I can win a bunch of games with that roster? I don't think he does. I mean, maybe Russell Wilson just had an off year. I don't know. I don't think he does. I think he's using this to try and get some more leverage at Michigan, try and get some more guys paid. I think it's really smart. I think he should do it, but I don't buy that he's actually interested in some of these NFL offers. And now, I mean, look, $20 million, maybe so, maybe so. And, you know, sometimes we know how these things go. Maybe a coach puts his name out there under the hope, you know, that he's going to use it as leverage, get and be able to generate more pay, and then an actual good offer comes along and goes, well, holy crap, if I knew this was actually out there, I would just take this. And so now what he hadn't intended to do, now all of a sudden that becomes a real possibility. That could happen too. I mean, I don't know, $20 million is a lot of money to be able to coach football. So maybe that is what happens. But I think right now, Jim Harbaugh's plans are to return to Michigan. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, guys, there is your podcast tonight. We will be back later in the week with none other than Ben King. He's the obvious star of the show. Beard, toupee. We don't know if he actually wears a toupee. We've had this discussion before, but he'll be back later in the week. Other than that, hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you soon.